Hello and welcome to another episode of Presscast. I'm Farbs, and in this episode, we will be talking about the recent escalation of violence against the people in Gaza and across the occupied West Bank. Here with me, I have Shaht Abu Salama, a Palestinian activist from Gaza, which right now is not in Gaza, but she knows a lot, and her family is in Gaza. So stay with us. Shaht, thank you very much for coming on the show. Welcome to the show. And
Thank you.
what's happening to Gaza right now?
Gaza is under severe bombardment from land, sea, and air by Israeli weaponry that has been besieging the Gaza Strip for the past nearly 2 decades. And indiscriminate fire is targeting right now the people, and we're counting massacre after another. These are war crimes and human rights violations, and it's been happening continuously since Israel came to existence on the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Our families right now are appealing from under heavy bombardment. Every call could be the last call with my family.
So, when was the last time you talked to your family?
I just spoke to them, but sometimes the connection is not possible because the bombing is literally non-stop, and the electricity is very scarce, and that is affecting the internet connection. And so, like, we try our best to stay in touch, but people are flooding into our home. There are currently over 30 people, most of them are children, are seeking refuge in my home from heavily bombarded areas, especially in the north of Gaza. It's horror, and this has been continuing for 7 days. Like, people haven't been sleeping, haven't been eating, they've lived in horror, but they're remaining steadfast, and all they can really, all they can do is just pray that they're going to survive this aggression.
I myself have never been to Gaza, but I know a friend of mine who's been to Gaza, and she told me, she's a reporter, and she told me that how, Gaza is not that big, it's not a big place, it's a small place. So any bomb that they shoot at you has a chance of dropping on a house, on a residential
Exactly.
area. So we are seeing like horrific images of houses just collapsing, bombs dropping, and
Yeah.
people, not knowing what's happening the next second. So I think you have lived under the same
Yes.
circumstances yourself in Gaza.
I've
How does it
survived.
feel?
I've survived
Yeah, I mean,
several. I will share a little bit, but I will have to remind the listeners and people watching that this is really like re-traumatizing. Like, every time we have to live through this, it opens an already bleeding wound. And I've lived with my people through such aggressions in the past so many times. I lost count, and our home was once threatened by bombardment, and it's extreme terror, like really unbearable. And Gaza, you have to remember, it is one of the most densely populated areas on earth, and the majority of its people are actually young people. Like, we have the highest rates of young people in Gaza, and the houses are packed. There is no so-called precise targeting. Any target can lead to the death of dozens of people and dozens of casualties. And we've seen right now, everything is recorded, everything is before our own eyes. And we're seeing the residential buildings are falling on people's heads. Until now, as we speak right now, rescue crews are trying to get people from under the rubble. This morning, we heard news from one of the journalists in Gaza. His name Muhammad Iki. He was with his family. He wasn't really actually at work. He was with his family that time in Al Wahda Street, that is currently completely distorted and devastated, flattened, leveled to the ground. And Muhammad Iki sent a message just a couple of hours ago from under the rubble saying that he's alive. And the rescue crew eventually, 2 hours later, announced his death. So really, like, the situation is beyond inhumane, and it keeps shocking us. Like, every time we think that Israel has crossed all red lines, there are still more red lines to cross, and the world is still watching. And right now, condemnations and petitions and calls for de-escalation is not enough. Israel has been killing the Palestinians systematically, and right now this killing machine is not only targeting our people in Gaza, it is only happening there at a more drastic level, but in West Bank, in 48 lands in nowadays Israel, in Yafa, in Haifa, in al-Fahm, Palestinians are being attacked indiscriminately. And you can see on all TV news, you can see live Palestinians are standing before one of the strongest armies of the world with their own bare chests, and they are being brutally repressed for daring to call for freedom, justice, and equality for their own people. The situation
Even
is unbearable. Unbearable.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but for the audience, for those who might not know, um, even before this new round of bombings, Gaza was living under a tightening siege, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, started at 2007, and it's been going on. And what I mean, when these things happen, when there are like bombs dropping on the city, people are losing their lives. Um, is there a change in the like the lockdown in the siege? Can people leave? Is there any help coming in? Any medical help? What about food? What about water? How do people deal with these things?
I mean, your questions are really putting salt on injury, because everything is disrupted right now. Life is disrupted, and people are scared to even like go to the supermarket. Gaza, as you said, has been already undergoing siege, a brutal siege that has been already condemned by human rights organization, by the United Nations, and it's been called brutal and inhumane. And the UN has made a report in 2012 that warns that Gaza may be unlivable by 2020. Right now, we've exceeded that deadline, and actually, even then, the Palestinians took it as an insult when the UN said that Gaza may be unlivable in 2020. Well, like, has it ever been livable? Do you imagine this sort of horror? Like, I was born in the middle of the first intifada that erupted in Jabalia refugee camp, where I was also born in 1987. And ever since, I was born in the middle of those horror times, with a gun being targeted at my mom's belly, who broke the curfew. She had to break a curfew where Israeli army basically killed any moving being. And I'm here in front of you, but I'm a survivor, and every Palestinian is really a survivor, because we know that this campaign of ethnic cleansing has been continuous ever since Israel came to existence on the ruins and expulsion and dispersion of the Palestinian people.
So, a couple of months ago, remember, there was this huge explosion in Beirut. And I had this European friend of mine who was living there because of his job, and he was raising his two kids, two European kids. And when, after the incident, we talked, he was really worried about the kids experiencing the trauma of the explosion. And then they lived far away from the epicenter of the explosion. And then a couple of months later, they moved back to Europe because because of the trauma that the children went through. I want to compare this with what you went through as a child.
This is the lived reality of all Palestinian children. Right now, the majority actually of those killed in Gaza are children. Israel is claiming to have a huge bank of targets. They call it bank of targets. Right now we are counting more than 180 killed in Palestine. 51 of them are children, and the bodies are still torn and buried under the rubble. There are so many people stuck under the rubble, and we don't know, like, the death toll is going to, it's shocking. We are counting like 7 days of constant bombing, 7 days of constant bombing that hasn't discriminated between a child, a woman, elderly, and those Palestinians are mostly refugees, and they have been dispossessed not once, not twice, multiple times. And actually yesterday we commemorated the 73rd anniversary of Nakba that we've experienced as uninterrupted violence. And this has been actually not just my life, this has been the marker as well of the childhood of my father, my parents, my grandparents, and we're living it one generation after the other. It's multi-generational trauma, transgenerational trauma, and it's been affecting Palestinians all over their exiles, all over their corners of exiles in Palestine and outside Palestine. It's incredible. I want to point out that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that has been actually issued around the same time 194 resolution of the UN was issued, that guaranteed the Palestinians the right to return and compensation. That was in December 1948. The Declaration of Human Rights that most countries endorsed say that all people were born equal and were born free and equal in life and rights and dignity, and the Palestinians have been denied this before the eyes of the whole world, and they've been excluded from the discourse of human rights. And the world has been invested in maintaining Israel way more than serving justice for the Palestinians. And what is happening right now is shame on all of humanity, that it's continuing and repeating over and over again. Justice for the Palestinians has been long overdue, and Israel, holding Israel to account, has been long overdue. The evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity has been piling since before even Israel came to existence, with the sponsorship of imperial powers such as the UK and the US. And it's continuing until now, and yet Israel continues to escape accountability. But we know from history that no regime based on oppression and injustice and the uprootedness of the native people has ever lasted. South Africa apartheid fell, and the imperial powers and their colonial empires, the biggest colonial empires, have also fell. There have been countries and people who have experienced settler colonialism and apartheid for centuries, and eventually the people have risen and justice was served. And we know that what is keeping us strong really now is our belief in justice and our absolute shock at the moral bankruptcy of the world and at the horrendous crimes that Israel is committing on behalf of defense and democracy and equality. This is all bullshit. We know this is all bullshit. And the Palestinians will keep on holding on to their rebels until Palestine is free.
Ms. Abu Salma, if I'm not mistaken, you're currently in the United Kingdom studying. And one of the main reasons as why we know that people around the world, especially in the Western world, do not know about this real situation in Palestine and Gaza is because of their media, because the media don't really show what's happening in Gaza. As someone who's right now in the UK, how's the media showing the events in Gaza? What are they saying about it?
So I am actually, I was supposed to submit my PhD thesis in the representation of Palestinians in colonial, humanitarian, and Palestinian documentary films. And this was supposed to happen next month. So I've studied the historical and systematic demonization of the Palestinians and how it manifests not only in media but also in international policy, in public discourse, in academia, in all these discourses where knowledge is being produced. But as we know, history has been for a long time being written from the perspective of the colonizers, the so-called victors, who claimed their victory and distracted from the immense pain and crimes that they committed against the people who are under colonization and oppression. But inshallah, we hope that history is going to be corrected. And right now, unfortunately, the international media is continuing to do its usual so-called mistakes. Let us remind that The Guardian on the 7th of May published a report. The Guardian published a report apologizing for mistakes, between quote unquote, that they've made in the past 200 years of broadcasting. And one of these mistakes was their support and facilitation for Balfour Declaration that enabled for the Zionist settlers to be treated as a priority and to be privileged over the native people of Palestine. And that was basically the foundation of what is now the Israeli apartheid that is dominating historic Palestine from the river to the sea. And we see international media entertaining Israel's so-called self-defense and parroting it uncritically. And not even that, deliberately. This is a strategy of blaming the victim, and this is not new, and most colonial powers, most oppressive regimes have used it against colonized people. And the so-called defense, the self-defense narrative, is completely false. It's a sham. You cannot claim self-defense against the people that you occupy. The international law is clear about this. And it's clear that the people fighting for liberation from colonial power have the right to resist, have the right to self-defense. So if anyone in this equation that is marked with severe power imbalance has the right to self-defense, it is the Palestinian people. And we all shoulder the moral responsibility to support the resilience and the resistance of the Palestinian people that is continuing for over a century of anti-colonial struggle against British and Zionist aggression.
So, as a Palestinian activist right now residing in the United Kingdom, what do you do to spread the word about the Palestinian struggle to, enlighten the public who may not have heard about the real truth? So, what do you do?
We try to do our best. I can barely feel my voice coming out, to be honest. And this has been my state for the past 7 days. I'm horrified and I'm shaken and I'm waiting for a call all the time. And a few days ago, I was live with Luki, the Iraqi British rapper in London. And I was live as well with several Palestinians on the ground. And in the middle of the live call, we received a phone call from my family. And my mom was semi-unconscious. And she was literally shouting from under the table. They hid under the table. And at that time, Israel launched over 100 missiles, coordinated bombing across the Gaza Strip. My mom was saying on the phone, it feels like the judgment day. It feels like the end of the world. All I want is hearing your voice. Make it stop. Make it stop. And she was like literally awaiting. She was awaiting for her death, and she called to say goodbye. And ever since, this has been the nightmare. This has been the nightmare that most Palestinians, this is not just my nightmare, this is the nightmare of every Palestinian. And those people who come live with us from Palestine, they know, they do it while mourning, while knowing that this could be the last appearance for them. The last appearance for them.
Ms. Abu Salma, it was so great talking to you. I know it was so difficult time for
I
you
need
to
thank you for giving your platform
Go
to
ahead, you have
highlight
as
this.
much time as you want.
I need to remind that everyone shoulders this responsibility, and it shouldn't be left to the Palestinians to highlight what is going on. What is going on in Palestine is a human rights issue, and it should concern every citizen of the world, all free people of the world. What we've done to South African people has to be done to the Palestinian people. We did it in the past, we did it in Algeria, we did it in South Africa, and we can do it for Palestine. Keep it up, everybody, stay strong, keep on exposing Israeli crimes, and keep on calling for freedom, justice, and equality, and return for the Palestinians. What is happening right now, the mainstream narrative has to be disrupted. The mainstream politics that are going on Palestine have to be disrupted. The so-called 1967 borders are not present right now, because the map of Israeli aggression is unifying the map of Palestine, and the Palestinians are being targeted beyond the green line, inside and outside. There is no so-called green line. Right now, all the Palestinians are one unit, calling for freedom, justice, and equality, and return to their homelands that right now in nowadays Israel. Israeli apartheid must be held to account. Make your rage heard in your neighborhoods, in your schools, in your workplace. Use your platforms. Use your platforms. Right now, the Palestinians in Gaza are struggling to actually get in touch with the world because of the severe bombardments. And the aggression is continuing. The people are being killed. Children are being killed right now as we speak. Do everything possible. And even if there is a truce announced, know that the Palestinians will be waiting for the next aggression. This will not stop as long as Israeli apartheid is held to account and is brought before justice. Thank you, everybody. Boycott, divestment, and sanction, and stop arming Israel.